Welcome back to Nourished Inside Out, the space where growth gets real and self love leads the way. I'm your host, Annetta Walklaw, and before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you of something powerful. You are worthy, you are enough, and you don't need to wait for permission to love yourself fully. That's exactly why I wrote my book, Blooming with Self Love, to give you the tools, affirmations, and daily mindset shifts to help you stand in your power and own your story. This book isn't just words on a page, it's a movement. So if you're ready to stop shrinking and start showing up for yourself, grab your copy today with the link in the show notes below, and let's walk this self love journey together.
It's just not feasible for you to get as many gym sessions in. So instead of telling yourself 5, falling way short, feeling terrible about it, and rinsing and repeating every week, you actually look at your schedule and you say, what is possible? Could I get in 2? Could I get in 1? How can I make this work?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. Today I'm here with Esther. Esther is a health industry veteran with 20 years of experience, passionately guiding busy people to break through the barriers to better health. In her 20s, despite being a personal trainer and nutrition coach, she wrestled with an all or nothing approach, swinging between strict diets, over exercising, overeating, pouring energy into her health without seeing the results that she felt that she deserved. That struggle has taught her the value of consistency and balance and a middle ground. She now lives daily juggling a business, family, and health goals while prioritizing mental, physical, and emotional well-being over the scale. Thank you so much for joining us today, Esther.
Thank you for having me. It's always funny hearing your own bio read back. I'm like, oh, that's good. That's that's well, whoever wrote that did a good job.
Yeah, you're like, actually, I did pretty good. That's amazing. Well, do you mind telling us a little bit about your background and how you got yourself into the health and wellness industry?
Yeah, it actually started at the tail end of high school. I was from a really small town where everybody played sports. You didn't actually need to be good at them. So I was on sports teams, but never really enjoyed it because I wasn't that good and I didn't like the pressure of people watching and feeling like I was letting down a team. So when I found the local YMCA and I found a way to move my body without the pressure of a score and an audience, I really enjoyed it. And with that, because I enjoyed it, I kept showing up and I saw changes to my body. I started getting attention from boys. It just was a really positive thing in my life. And it came at an influential time when I was thinking about college and majors. And I ended up going to school for exercise science in an effort to really just get paid to work out, and quickly found out that first I was going to be so stressed and overwhelmed with school that it was all going to go out the window. I wasn't going to exercise. I was going to eat terribly. I was going to put on a ton of weight. And then even when I kind of worked out that clunky transition, then I started personal training, only to realize I'm going to spend a lot of time in the gym watching people work out and still struggle with figuring out when I work out and how to balance, what I'm doing during the day with wanting to be a 20 something and go out and drink and date and socialize, and just kind of trying to figure out where what balance even was for me and why it felt so hard to bridge the gap between knowing what to do. I had all of this textbook knowledge, not just in exercise, but I went back and did internships and certifications in nutrition and knew so much stuff, but was still struggling to actually do it myself. And that's what I saw time and time again with clients too, is it wasn't really a lack of knowledge. Sure, there's some gaps, but generally speaking, most people can tell you what they could be doing differently to be healthier. So that's not it. It's how do I actually do those things in the midst of my real life, being in a relationship, having a job, having a family. If all I had to do was focus on my health, it'd be easier. But I have a lot more going on than that. So that's what led me to really dive headfirst into human behavior and how we take information and actually implement it in our lives in a meaningful way. And that's really the crux of what I do now.
That's so Well said, because I think a lot of times we know what we should be doing, but it's hard to balance it out. It's funny because when I was in high school, I used to be a dancer and I came across a disc injury from dancing. And I went to go see a personal trainer and I loved going to him because I really saw the improvements from what my trainer was teaching me and helping me with, that I wanted to go down that route as well. But it kind of ran into the same issue as you, where yeah, you would be at the gym all the time, but you wouldn't be prioritizing yourself because you would be prioritizing clients and doing all of that work. So, what are some things that have helped you balance out your life from having a family and being having a partner and your career? Because those are big tasks to juggle throughout the day.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just reframing how you think about it. It's your health, whatever kind of that means to you. It's not a nice to have. It's a non-negotiable.
Okay.
And it really you need to start with yourself. What I hear from a lot of mostly women, but I'm sure it applies to men to an extent as well, is that we feel like we are needed by so many other people and things that our needs end up on the back burner, and that it can feel selfish to take care of ourselves. But the reality is, you're not taking care of anybody else to the best of your ability if you're not also taking care of yourself. And in fact, if you don't take care of yourself for long enough, eventually it's not going to be a choice. You are going to have to basically stop everything else and focus on yourself. So before it gets to that point, start figuring out what are some small things that I can do to take care of myself. And I think the other piece is exactly what I said, starting small.
Mm.
We have these kind of beliefs that in order to make any sort of meaningful change, we need to overhaul everything. And that feels so overwhelming and daunting that we feel like, oh, I don't have it in me to start that now. But like once things calm down or once this milestone passes, then I'll, kind of do all the things. And we end up just kicking the can down the road because it feels like we don't have it in us to do it all. So in that instead we do nothing. So really figuring out what's kind of the low hanging fruit for me? What are some healthy habits that I could work on developing that won't feel like a second job, that won't feel like I need to drastically change what I'm doing, but they'll give me a little bit of evidence that I'm doing what a healthy person does. And that momentum can then help me do a little bit more and a little bit more. So I think the keys are A, realizing that it's important, B, not allowing yourself to wait, and C, starting with just, wherever feels manageable for you right now.
Yeah, that's great advice. So, what was your mindset like before, and what is it like now? Because, like you said, start small. And mm, I guess a lot of times when we are setting a new goal or trying to get into a new habit, we kind of get into this mindset sometimes like, oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to do that. I don't want to do this, but I know I should. So, how can people start to reframe their mindset to enjoy doing those small daily habits to create change in their life?
Great question. I think there's kind of two approaches. The first is kind of the the brainy, little bit woo-woo one, which is that the way we think about things affects how we feel,
Sure.
which affects how we act, and that affects our results. So it makes sense that if all day you're dreading your workout and telling yourself how much it's going to suck and how much you don't want to do it, well, of course, you're skipping it more often than not, right? It's a dreaded thing
Mhm.
that when push comes to shove, you'd rather not do. That's because you have framed it as such.
Mhm.
So you don't need to go to the other extreme and tell yourself, this is going to be the highlight of my day. I can't wait to do this, right? Because you're not going to buy that either. But what you can remind yourself is that it is a choice. You don't have to. You no one's forcing you to. You could just decide, you know what, that's not important to me, I'm not going to do it. And will there be consequences? Sure, but it is a choice. And I always find that a little bit empowering to remind myself that, like, well, I'm the one deciding this. I think it also helps to remind yourself that while you may not enjoy the act of doing the thing, it does have value to you. You're doing it because you want the outcome. You want the result of having done it. And in the short term, that's kind of the endorphin rush after a workout that you do. Nobody ever says, oh, I wish I didn't do that workout. I feel worse now, right? You generally are glad you did it. And then in the long run, as those individual efforts compound, you actually see and feel the physical changes. You're stronger, your clothes are fitting better, whatever it is goal that you're after. So focusing more of your mental energy on the positive outcomes rather than the negative, the thing that you're telling yourself you don't want to do. So that's kind of the brainy, a little bit of woo-woo part. The other part is you're the adult. You're in the driver's seat. This is your life. There is not going to be the authority or like the parental figure that comes along and makes you do it. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you just need to parent yourself and allow that little, toddler tantrum or the teenager tantrum of just like, I don't want to. Okay, you don't have to want to, but we're doing it anyway. Yeah. And if you think about it, there's stuff that we do all day, every day that we'd rather not. We just do it because either the consequence is bad enough that we can't avoid it, or we, want to have done it, right? You may not want to go to work, but you do want the paycheck. So there's all sorts of things that if we really had our preferences, we wouldn't do these things, but we do anyway. So I think developing the skill of parenting yourself when it's necessary is really helpful. Of, all right, well, too bad. I'm not giving you a choice right now. This is what's happening. You can kick and scream the whole time, but it's still going to get done. So it's up to you. Do you want to do it kicking and screaming, or do you want to, try to be pleasant? Either way, it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just really like switching that mindset from I have to I get to. So many times I think we get into the mindset, oh, I have to do this. I have to do that. Like nobody's making you, but I think something that's helped me is like when creating new habits or goals is saying, I get to do this. I get to do that. And I think that's also helps switch the mindset too. I saw this quote the other day and it said, if your boss says to be at work at 7 a.m., you're going to be at work at 7 a.m. If your boss tells you to throw out the trash, I hated throwing out the trash at work, but I still did it. And then when you tell yourself you're going to start that side hustle on Friday and then you don't do it, why are we letting ourselves down instead of giving ourselves the love and appreciation that we should by staying accountable to our goals? I think a lot of times we get into the mindset of I'm too busy for this and we choose busy over productive. Can you explain the two and how people can switch their mindset from I'm too busy to this to I'm being productive?
That's an awesome question. Yeah, busyness is almost like a badge of honor where you ask how anybody is and they say, oh, busy, the kids are in sports. It's like we pride ourselves in how busy we are. But how much of the time that we're spending is actually getting meaningful things done, and how much is just kind of time wasters or placeholders or, not having any sort of meaningful impact. And I have a perfect example of this. At the beginning of the year, I started using an app to block social media on my phone because I just, I need it to schedule my content for my job. So I can't just get rid of it. But knowing that it's on my phone, I just kept mindlessly picking it up and squandering all this time. So now I use a blocker. I just can't access it from my phone during the entire day. And I have, over the last few months, been so productive. And I feel like that's the perfect example is social media, popping on your phone when you have that 5-minute break between meetings or when you're waiting in the carpool line. You're doing something and you feel busy, right? Because you're also doing another task, but you're not getting anything productive done. And then the end of the day hits and you just feel like I've been so busy all day and I still have this, growing to-do list of stuff that didn't get done. So I would encourage everybody to use the social media blocker and just see. And at first I wasn't putting two and two together at what an impact it was having. I just was noticing that at the end of the workday before I went to pick up my son from school, I had a little bit of extra time. I'd gotten done my work and I started riding my Peloton again for like half an hour, which I hadn't done in a long time. I noticed that because I don't have the option in a 5 or 10 minute kind of dead zone in my day to just scroll it away, that I was chipping away at like small projects and I am reading more. There have been so many benefits of it because I am more productive in the time that I have. I'm getting hours back in my day. So we all have examples of things that we've either added to our plate unnecessarily that don't actually need to get done, or things that are comfortable because we're used to doing them, but we could get over the discomfort of not, and then we would have some time for something else. And something that can be really eye-opening in addition to social media is just keeping kind of a time audit for a full day, where say every 15 or 30 minutes you kind of jot down, like, what am I doing in this time? And you see how many pockets are, not really accounted for. You're like, I did something, I did this 5-minute task and I didn't really do anything else in the rest of that 30-minute window. You start to see how that stuff adds up. And really, when you think about how little it takes to start developing healthy habits, if you can just create 10 minutes in your day from letting some busy work go, there's a workout, or there's a stretching session, or there's chopping some veggies so that dinner is less frantic, or there's packing your lunch for the next day. You don't need a lot of time, but once you identify those windows, it's a whole lot easier to then insert the healthy behaviors into them.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I know you were saying that you were talking about building habits and starting small. What was the impact or the influence with your social circles? Because I think those can also play a huge role if we're used to the social circles that we're comfortable with instead of the ones that want to grow with us. Did you have a social circle that was comfortable, or did you have to kind of put boundaries there and create a new social circle?
That's a great question. So my husband's in the military. We've moved every few years. So I have lots of long-term friends that I don't live near. So I'm always kind of making new friends, and I am very intentional about who I spend my time with. That, of course, you want, differences of opinion. You don't want to just be hanging out with like clones of yourself, but kind of lifestyle wise, I want to be around people who are active, healthy, enjoy, doing active things, who are doing something ambitious, or they have goals that they're striving for, because it's, there's the cliche quote of like, you're the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, but it's true. Who you're around influences you greatly. So if I move to a new city and I find this group of friends and we bond over going out and drinking and doing happy hours and watching The Bachelor, then it's going to be a lot harder for me to not do those things. Whereas if I make a friend that I see out running or at a gym, or I strike up a conversation in the grocery store, I can create the social support around myself that normalizes how I want to be living. And I think that is really difficult for a lot of people because you don't necessarily have the opportunity to start fresh every few years. You do probably feel like, oh, I have my people. I don't want to not be friends with them, but I also do recognize that maybe we're in different chapters of our journeys here. Maybe they're not focused on being healthier and I am, and that's feeling hard. So rather than thinking about who you're kind of removing from your life, just think about who you can add. How can you supplement what you already have and add people who inspire you and support you and uplift you? And then you can sort of work out the balance of, I still see my old friends. Maybe instead of doing happy hour every week, I go once a month. Or maybe I find that when we're in a bigger group, it's harder for me to not succumb to peer pressure, but I can see each of those friends individually and not have a hard time sticking to my intentions. So I think it is uncomfortable to see how relationships change, especially when someone might feel like they're being left behind, or that people's reactions always have more to do with them than you. And I think that's really helpful to remember. So if you're getting criticism because you're trying to be healthy or you've lost weight, that's generally the insecurity of the other person, not a reflection of you. And I think it's really helpful to remember that, and then to take notice of who are the friends that are happy for me and who are cheering me on, and who are the ones that always have something negative to say and seem to want to bring me down. And again, you're in the driver's seat. You get to decide, how do I want to allocate my time with those people in my life.
Yeah, that's good advice. Instead of removing people, just adding more people and being more conscious about the people that you associate with. I know for me, like I feed off people's energy fast. So it's so important for me to be aware of who I'm around all the time. And I like that advice of adding more people instead of necessarily removing them completely. When it comes to people staying on top of their goals and creating healthy habits and boundaries, how can they stay consistent? Because I think that's like the biggest struggle is staying consistent.
Yeah, you nailed it. That is the crux of everything, right? Is most people would say they do like pretty well most of the time or some of the time. It's not that we're way off base. Most people know, drink your water, have some vegetables, don't snack a ton, move your body. It's that we have a lot of starts and stops where we'll, be quote unquote good for a little bit, and then some sort of disruption happens. We get busy at work or we travel, somebody gets sick, and then it just feels like we come to the screeching halt, and then it's very hard to ramp ourselves up again, and we end up with this like herky jerky effort that feels very effortful when you're doing it, but also doesn't yield any results, which then puts you in the position of like, well, if I'm trying so hard and I don't have anything to show for it, why am I bothering?
Yeah.
And you're exactly right that it all comes down to consistency. So first and foremost, having some form of a tactile, physical, visual tracker is really, really helpful. I was just talking to a client earlier, and she has a big whiteboard that she's been using, and she writes her goals for the day. And then she has like little, kind of magnets that she moves as she does the things. And she's able to see at a glance, what are my expectations of myself, and have I done those things? And what that can do is help you pick up on patterns of when you're when you're consistent and when you're not. So for a lot of people, it's like, yeah, Monday through Thursday, looking good. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, not so much. So then once you have that awareness, then you can figure out, well, what am I going to do differently on the weekend to make this easier? So using that awareness to then change something. Figuring out, okay, what is it about the weekdays that is easier? It's probably that I have more structure. So how do I create some structure on the weekends? I think another piece is, again, starting small and setting goals that are meeting yourself where you are. It's really easy to kind of shoot for the moon and be like, well, ultimately, I want to be walking 10,000 steps. So I'm going to start that today. And it's like, well, I've been averaging like 3,000 to 4,000. That's a pretty big jump. It's going to be a pretty big change in how I'm spending my time. And I might be able to do it for a little bit, but you'd be so much better off if you say, all right, now it's 4,000 minimum. I'm shooting for, say, 4,000 to 6,000. And once I'm consistently doing that, then I say now it's 5,000 to 7,000. And I just gradually ramp it up so that over the course of, 3 months or 6 months or however long it takes, you're getting yourself to that end goal, but you've done it in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. And therefore, it's harder to talk yourself out of doing. And then I think the final piece is looking at, I call it doing life admin, but setting aside time each week where you actually look at your upcoming week and the specific demands on your time and your energy. It's easy for us to just set the same goals every single week and then over time fall short and train ourselves that it doesn't matter what we say we're going to do because we're not going to do it anyway. So it's really important that your goals are realistic for the upcoming stretch of time. So it may be that you have no problem getting into the gym 5 days a week during certain seasons of work. Your schedule works out that way. But then, say you're an accountant, you're going into tax season. It's just not feasible for you to get as many gym sessions in. So instead of telling yourself 5, falling way short, feeling terrible about it, and rinsing and repeating every week, you actually look at your schedule and you say, what is possible? Could I get in 2? Could I get in 1? How can I make this work so that the goals that I'm setting are ones that I'm actually confident I can reach? And as you get that consistency under your belt, as you day in and day out are doing what you said you'd do, you develop the self-trust to know that you are reliable. And then once you know that you can be trusted, your consistency just, goes through the roof.
That's great advice. I was listening to an audio the other day and it was saying that your goals are not unrealistic. A lot of times our timeline is. If we have a goal or a dream, it's placed in us on purpose. A lot of times we want to do it immediately and we don't really break it down to do it step by step. And then we get frustrated because we don't get it done sooner than what we think. What advice would you give to somebody when it comes to breaking down goals and really making a realistic timeline?
Yeah, that's such a good question. You're exactly right. I read a book once that talked about how you have three options. You can either change the goal, you can change the timeline, or you can change the approach. But it's got to be one of those things. In the case with health, to get there faster generally means taking things to more of an extreme. So that's not necessarily the solution. And you don't want to give up on the goal. So yeah, generally it's let me change the timeline that I'm giving myself. And I think knowing the outcome that you're after is really important, right? That's like your compass, that it's hard to get anywhere if you don't know where you're going. You're just kind of wandering around. So you do need to know, what is the outcome that I'm after? But then you need to break that down into behavior-based goals that you can directly control. So say I want to lose 50 pounds. I'd like to lose that as quickly as possible. But I cannot directly control what the scale says any given day. What I can control is the choices that I'm making. So am I sticking to a caloric deficit? Am I prioritizing my protein and my fiber? Am I hitting my step goal? Am I getting in my strength training? Am I sleeping? Am I managing my stress? Those are the things I can directly control. So you want to focus most of your energy on the behaviors. And that goes back to the consistency, tracking that. If you are consistent in the right behaviors, the results are going to come. And in the case of weight loss, I think just to help people be realistic, healthy, sustainable weight loss is about a pound a week. It varies, from half a pound to 2 pounds, depending on how much weight you have to lose and how many of the things you're doing. But that's kind of what it breaks down to. So if I want to lose 50 pounds, I'm looking at roughly a year. And I think it's important to know that that's not linear and that life is going to continue happening even when you have a goal that you're working toward. So I always like to tack on a little bit of extra time for just the unexpected stuff. The vacation that I told myself I was really going to stay focused on, but then I ended up, just wanting to relax and not really think about these things. The couple weeks stretch over the holidays where I got sick and then the kids got sick and I just kind of maintained where I was, right? So expect that life is going to continue throwing you monkey wrenches and build that in. Because if you have unrealistic expectations, you are likely to end up disappointed, feeling frustrated that it's not working fast enough, and then prone to giving up again. And you just rinse and repeat in that sort of all or nothing zone again. So really reminding yourself that any progress is getting you closer to where you want to be. And if you just continue doing the things that are helping you see that progress, you will get to the goal. And to really celebrate your behaviors and all of the wins that you see along the way, instead of telling yourself, once I get there, then I'll celebrate, or then I can be happy, or then I can find a healthy relationship. Focusing on how is your life changing positively now based on the changes that you've made, so that, yes, it feels good to accomplish the goal, but you're feeling so much better along the way as well.
That's really good. It's a lot of times we think to ourselves, I'll be happy when I get there, or I'll be happy when I achieve this. I'll be happy when. But the when is now. I remember, like we need to celebrate the small moments now. We need to celebrate our progress now, because if we're taking and making efforts to improve 1% each day, that's worth celebrating, because you're either going backwards or you're moving forward. And if you're choosing to move forward at least 1% in any area of your life, then that's worth celebrating. Get yourself your favorite coffee, or take yourself out to your favorite lunch. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but celebrate those things completely. So like when it comes to treating ourselves with compassion, what's the key to building sustainable habits, and why do so many people struggle with giving themselves compassion along the way to reaching their goals?
Right? It's so interesting that we're so freely giving of compassion to others,
Yeah.
but it's almost like we stonewall the application of it to ourselves, and we really need it. I can't tell you how many women I've talked to who say, I just need kind of a drill sergeant. I need to be told what to do. I need to be berated if I don't. I'm like, that is the last thing you need. You're already doing that to yourself. You're already berating yourself when you're imperfect. You don't need another person piling on. What you need is someone to mirror for you the compassion that you deserve. So someone who you can tell, I fell short, this happened, I'm disappointed by this, and they can show you what that compassion looks like. And as you receive it, you start to kind of realize that you're worthy of it. And you can practice in small ways giving it to yourself. And it's so, so necessary because you can't change from a place of hate. So if you're always beating yourself up because you fell short of your unrealistic to begin with expectations, then when you're feeling badly, when you're feeling like a failure, and you know that your self-talk kind of unravels into really negative things of, I'm hopeless, I'll never succeed, I'm doomed, I'm stuck, I just don't have it in me, right? We really mean to ourselves. Think about how you feel when you're telling yourself that, or think about how you would feel if someone else told you that. Does that make you want to take any sort of positive action? Of course not. It makes you want to comfort yourself. And what do we do for comfort? Well, we eat, we lay on the couch, we do kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do. So you need to kind of play out how the lack of compassion has been holding you back thus far. So once you see the cascade effect of beating yourself up, then you can kind of try on, all right, well, what would be different if I got on the scale and it was up a pound, but I didn't make it a big deal, and I didn't then go eat my feelings and say screw it for the whole rest of the weekend? What would be different if I just said, okay, what's the next healthy thing that I can do? And how could that kind of downward spiral turn into an upward spiral if I just give myself the compassion that I deserve? And I think the important piece is that it's not just compassion. It's also taking ownership of, this is my life, these are my choices. What am I going to do differently? If I'm not happy with the thing that just happened or the results that I'm getting or whatever it is, what am I going to do differently? Those things can both exist. I can cut myself some slack and use this experience to learn and then to change things going forward so I don't keep repeating the same miserable thing.
Yeah, a lot of times we are our own worst critics, exactly like you said. How can somebody start to get out of that mindset as well and start to also build compassion for themselves and the progress that they're making, but also really understand that progress is one step at a time? Because, if you're looking at a flight of 20 steps on a staircase, you're not going to go from one and jump to the 20th. You're going to go one step at a time. And I think that visual always helps me see like the bigger picture by taking it slowly. So how do you recommend people to have that mindset shift and to give themselves the grace and compassion?
I think it's a little bit cliche, but it's really true that if you picture yourself saying, your inner monologue out loud to your young daughter or your best friend or your mom, you'd be appalled. You would never write on the bathroom mirror a message for your daughter to read every morning. That is what you tell yourself every time you look in the mirror. You know that, if I look in the mirror every morning and I tell myself, oh, you're so fat. Imagine if that was on the mirror for your daughter to read. You would never do that because her reading that and her hearing that day in and day out would make her feel terrible. And I think you have like kind of a more visceral reaction when you think about another loved one instead of yourself. But the same goes for you. So it can also help to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes and say, okay, if my daughter or my best friend came to me saying, this is how I'm feeling, what would I say to them? Because it's very easy to extend compassion to other people. And then whatever it is, maybe write it down, say it out loud, whatever it is you would say to another person, turn that back on yourself. And like I said, write it down, record it, have it somewhere that you can kind of reread it and replay it over and over again. And you can help incorporate that into your mental soundtrack. You're never going to completely eradicate the negative voice, the inner critic. We all have it. It's just you get better at kind of turning down the volume on it and kind of tucking it away in the back of your head, where instead of it being the loudest voice, you're just like, yeah, you always say that. And you just like, you stop taking it so seriously. You stop believing everything it says just because it's saying it loudly. And then I think working on first getting yourself just to like a neutral place, right? Is I think people jump from one extreme to the next where it's like, okay, well, instead of looking in the mirror and telling myself I'm fat and picking myself apart, I'm going to stand in a power pose and I'm going to tell myself I am a powerful goddess. And you just like roll your eyes. You're like, well, I don't believe that. Like, this feels so silly. I don't want to do that. So again, meet yourself where you are. Just remove some of the negative words, get yourself to neutral, and just, be able to look at yourself in the mirror and not pick yourself apart. And remember that although it doesn't feel like it because we're not in the habit of doing it, we get to choose our thoughts. And the ones that we have recurringly and the ones that feel really true, it's just because we've thought them a whole bunch of times. It's not that they're actually true. So that I feel like is really freeing when you realize I can just start adding new thoughts into my head. I can just choose to focus more on the things I like about myself than the things that I don't. I can at least give equal airtime to the positive that exists. And it's a process, of course. It's not like overnight you stop having these, self-doubt or self-criticism. But over time, you get better at kind of being the DJ and controlling which feeds are coming in louder. And it feels so much better to not be so negative about yourself all the time.
That's so beautiful. I love that. So, before we go ahead and wrap things up, is there any last piece of advice that you'd love to share with the audience that we haven't covered yet, or something that's on your mind right now?
I think one thing is to just know that whatever it is that you're going through, whatever barriers to better health you've been experiencing, they are not unique to you, and there is nothing wrong with you. So often I see people just kind of default to I must just be missing something. I just don't have discipline, or I just don't have willpower. I'm just not motivated. There must be something wrong with me. It's easier for other people, that sort of thing. That's just not true. There is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that you're missing. You are entirely capable of changing whatever it is that you want. And it's so much easier when you understand that you just have a human brain that is kind of hardwired to do certain things. And those things make sense from an evolutionary standpoint to focus on the negative and be looking for threats. And when you understand those things about yourself, it's so much easier to then work with them and see that there really is nothing that you're missing. You've been capable all along.
Awesome. And what does it mean for you to be nourished inside out?
Oh, I love that. To me, it means being physically healthy, yes, but also mentally, emotionally, and socially healthy. That I have people around me who I love and I know love me, that I feel good about myself, that I'm showing up each day, taking care of all of the aspects of my health, not just the physical, which so many of us tend to focus on, but I want to feel whole, not like a shell of a person.
Amazing. So, thank you so much for everything today, Esther, and joining us today. Can you please tell us where can people find you and support you in your work?
Thank you so much for having me. My website is esteravant.com. That has links to my social media. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I also have a podcast and book called To Your Health. And the book is really intended to be a roadmap for reaching a health-related goal. It has the what to do that we've been talking about, but it also really focuses a ton on how to do it and how to overcome the very common obstacles that you're likely to face. And you can find that on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Awesome. I'll have that link down in the show notes below so people can stay in touch. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, Esther.
Thank you. This was great.